Hi, welcome back to Mechanical Advantage Garage. I'm Kerry. This is going to be a long rambling talking video, but it's a precursor to something that I think is really cool. I'm going to talk about this project that I'm going to be doing a little bit with Lucor Racing. They're going to help me retrieve something that I've had parked for a long time. But before I get to that, I'm going to introduce it to you and show you some paperwork and stuff, and basically tell you a really good story about vehicular misfortune, right? So I've become one of these people that the old car hobby hates. I have a car parked in a driveway that is not moving, that is the kind of car that old car people want, right? What kind of car is it, you're asking? Well, it is my 1967 Pontiac GTO. And you can see this picture here. This is from when I actually bought the car. I bought this car when I was 19 years old in 1997. You can see I have long hair there. Actually, I think there's a better picture of me with terrible long hair standing next to the car right there. Yep, the 90s were so great. So I was 19 years old, and I wanted a project car in the worst way. I wanted something to tinker with, and I wanted an old muscle car. And, well, I guess the story actually begins the summer before. So I had been pitching this idea to my parents for quite a while because I lived in their house and I needed their garage and their tools and all that great stuff. And in the summer of '96, we ended up dragging home a 1957 Corvette that was supposed to be a project between all the members of the family. And I'll see if I can find a picture of it and I'll insert it in the video. If I can't, well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I quickly found out that when you have three cooks all cooking the same stew, you're going to fight a lot, right? And in this case, the stew being a 57 Corvette. What ended up happening with that car is it went to a Corvette restorer, who I ended up working for a very brief period, which was a great experience. But I ended up not actually working on the car, and I ended up not making a lot of decisions about the car. And it ended up not being my project, and I didn't end up learning anything other than, if you're going to buy a project car, it's got to be your project car. It can't be anybody else's, right? Because the moment you start doing it with somebody else and they get to make decisions and they have money and you don't, or something happens and, you know, there's a power dynamic, y'all are just going to end up fighting. And we fought a lot. So once that car was at a shop and being worked on by somebody else, I went out in search of an old muscle car. And we used to have these papers. This is back, I mean, the internet was around, but it wasn't around in the same fashion that it was today. You didn't find a lot of cars on it. You still had a lot of the old-fashioned, you know, dollar papers that you'd pick up at gas stations that were your local buy and sell. And we had one that was all just classic cars for the New York, Long Island area. Actually, it was New York, New Jersey, a little bit of Connecticut, basically tri-state area. Anywhere you could drive to within an hour, right? So in there, I saw an ad for a white-on-white 1967 GTO convertible. Now, I know what you're saying. This is not a white-on-white 67 convertible. In fact, it's a burgundy-on-black hardtop. And I called the guy, and he lived out in Kings Park, Long Island. And he was a super nice guy, but he had a GTO problem. He had a couple of them. But I called him about the convertible. It was a 4-speed convertible, white-on-white. Beautiful car, and I have always loved GTOs. I saw them when I was a kid. You know, I see them at car shows. I was like, that is such a gorgeous looking car. I want one so bad. So it was a reasonable price. It ran, it drove. It needed a few things, but I took a chance. I drove out there. And as I'm driving up to the place, I see another white-on-white convertible GTO pass me coming down the guy's street. And I'm like, uh-oh. Something happened. So I pull into his driveway. I told him, hey, you know, I told you I was coming. And he's like, yeah, but, you know, that's the guy I bought the car from. I kind of had to give it back to him. You know, and I understood. And by the way, this was in a period when muscle cars weren't really that expensive. I think he paid like 4 or 5 grand for a running, nice, white on white, 4-speed GTO convertible. I don't know if it was numbers matching, I can't remember that. But so I'm talking to the guy, and I'm like, hey, you know, I drove out here 45 minutes for nothing. He's like, well, how much do you like GTOs? And I go, I love them. They're my favorite car. I always wanted one, and I want to buy one. And he goes, well, I have another one. Do you want to take a look at it? And he opened up his garage, and there was the car. It was burgundy, black roof, GTO. It had 60,000 miles on it, but it was in kind of rough shape. It ran, but it didn't run well. It had primer spots all over the body. Yeah, I don't know if you can see in some of these pictures here. I think it's in this one. Yeah, the nose is primed. If you get in real close there, you can see. Actually, it's better to see it in here. The whole lower body is primed in this picture. And he was priming the rough spots to get ready to do panel replacement. He had also taken off the vinyl top and had painted it in latex house paint with a brush. But, you know, for 50 feet away, it still looked like a vinyl top. I didn't care. I was smitten with the car. I made a deal with the guy. I think the car was $3,000 in 1997, which, remember that number because it's going to come up again. So I made a deal with him, told him I'd be back the next night with the money in a tow truck, and I'd come pick up the car. So he called me and he said, hey, listen, when you come, can you bring cash? And I didn't ask him why. And I thought it was a strange request at the time, but, you know, maybe it's not that strange. But I said, okay, sure, no problem. I go home. I tell my mother about it, and she's like, oh, you're not bringing that guy cash. He's going to hit you over the head and mug you. And I'm like, I don't know. I was in his house. He seems pretty nice. He looks like he's got a good job, and, you know, he has a nice house. So I'm going to assume that he's not just there to hit me over the head and steal $3,000. And she goes, I think you should take a certified check. And, you know, being 19, I didn't really want to argue with my parents too much. I went out and I got a bank certified check instead. I come to find out when I go to pick up the car the next night, I show up and he goes, I thought you were bringing cash. And I said, well, it's a bank certified check. It's as good as cash. He goes, look, man, I'm getting divorced. My ex-wife is here. I thought I was giving her half in cash. She's not going to be happy. And boy, was she not happy. We start up the car. We start to back it out down the driveway. It's smoking in the driveway. And she had a white 70s C3 Corvette. I want to say it was like a 74, 75, something like that. You know, they're all the same from 74 to 77. But it was one of those disco era vets. Like, they were practically worthless in those days. Nobody wanted them. You could find them for like $1,000 all day long. But apparently I had gotten too close to it, backing out the GTO. And she came out of that house screaming, hey, you're too close to my Corvette, don't get it. And she's just yelling at me. I'm this 19-year-old scared kid behind the wheel of this car. All of a sudden, this woman is yelling at me. And I'm like, oh, man, like, I kind of see why you're getting divorced. I feel really bad, you know. And he was actually really cool about it. In the end, he's like, look, I'm sorry. You know, you're a kid. You didn't know. I didn't tell you. I'll take the bank check. I'll work it out with her. I'm like, great. But then she yelled at me 2 more times while I was loading up the car. And then I left, right? And the car was mine. And it was great. Now, well, for a period of time. The thing that you don't realize about having an old car project is old car projects burn through money. And when you are not a skilled person working on cars, you have to farm out a lot of stuff that you get yourself into a lot of trouble with. And that was kind of the first lesson I learned, is I thought, you know, I'll try this myself, and if I can't do it, I'll send it to a shop. And I ended up doing a frame-off restoration on the car with everything except the body panels. The whole car was mechanically done, engine, transmission, rear end. And I got over my head pretty quick because all I had in the way of tools was a little suitcase toolkit from Craftsman, and not much else. No feeler gauges, no torque wrench, nothing like that. And I'm thinking I can do an engine rebuild. Like, how pie in the sky optimistic am I, right? So I ended up spending between 97 and 99, roughly $16,000 to have everything on that car gone through, which, by the way, I don't feel so bad about now, because if you look at the price of GTOs, they have risen to the point where I could probably sell the car as a runner right now, needing all of the bodywork that it still needs, for more than $16,000. So it is what it is. But I had a lot of adventures in the car. I will say that. The one great lesson I learned is try to keep your project car a running car for as long as you can, because then you get to use it, and anytime you get frustrated with the damn thing, you can just get in it and go somewhere and beat on it and feel really good about it, you know? And then it'll come back and it'll refresh you, right? So try not to like take it home, blow it all apart, and then you're like, you know, 6 months into it and you're demoralized, you don't know what to do, and you're still 6 months away from ever putting the car back together or driving it, and it's just driving you crazy. But I did talk about paperwork, and one of the cool things I wanted to show you is that I believe I'm the third or fourth owner of my GTO, but when I got it, it came with this, which I think is really cool. This is the car owner companion. It is the original paperwork for the car when it was sold new, and this car was sold new on Long Island in New Hyde Park, which was probably about 20 minutes from my parents' house when I was growing up. And this is the package they would give you, and it contains everything in here. Your let's see what's in here. So we've got the original owner's manual right there. I've got a second copy of the original owner's manual. I think one of these is from my Tempest. What's really funny about this is that a couple years later, in 2000, well actually quite a few years later, I bought a 67 Tempest Sprint 6, the overhead cam inline 6 car, because I saw one really cheap on Long Island. And when I got the car, it turned out that the same salesperson that had sold my GTO had sold that Tempest as well. And that was another 60,000 mile car, and it was fun and it was cool. And that was a different set of adventures. What was in here? So these are notes on the VIN number of the car and the engine identification code, and this is from, it looks like 1981, from a previous owner. Oh, this one's cool. This was one of the first time slips that I ever passed in this car, and this was at West Hampton, and stock before anything rebuilt, the car turned a 14.5, right? And I think, if I remember that day, that was at West Hampton drag strip. There's no date on it. That's the bummer. 95 miles an hour. I had a 2.2 60-foot time, 14.526 ET, and 95.22 miles an hour. And I think I was running on 2 barrels because the Quadrajet was backfiring when I would come off the line, and it was shutting the secondaries. So I was running on these really tiny primaries through the traps. And here's another time slip from the same day. This one is 14.58 at 94.7. So a really consistent car. And this is the, before I show you this is the thing I want to show you. This is what's called a Protecto plate, right? And the Protecto plate is kind of like your warranty, right? So let me show you that there. And inside of it, these are the different coupons for service for the car, right? And you would, like here, battery service, adjustment certificate, all of that, right? And what you would do, and here are the VIN plates, right, for the car. They would make these plates, and if you had the car serviced, what they would do is they would run ink over that, and they would close the book, and they would open it up, and they would take the ticket. Like in this one here, it's the 6-month validation. They would take the ticket, and that's how they did warranty work. Now, I happen to know that I think it was this one or the 12-month validation, they replaced the transmission on the car because it has a warranty replacement 68 transmission with the tag, with the warranty tag attached to it, and that was in the car when I got it. So it is a numbers matching car. It's a 400 cubic inch Pontiac. There's no big block and small block. There's big journal and small journal. And small journal is 326, 400, 326, 350, 400, 428, and then there may be some 455s that are small journal. I don't remember. I don't think there are. I think it's 428. And then the large journals are 421, 428, 455s, right? And that's just the crank journal is larger, right? So the 400 falls into those small journal areas, but it makes power like a big block. My car was a 335 horsepower factory car, which was the standard 4-barrel GTO setup. And it was posi with 355 gears and a TH400 tranny, automatic with the his/her shifter, right? And all automatic GTOs in 67 came with the his/her shifter, and they all came with TH400s, no TH350s. So yeah, you can see how the imprint happens there, and that some of these tags were already punched. So, and this one was done at Harry Brown Pontiac in Hillside Avenue, New Hyde Park. I think they were still around up until 2009 when Pontiac closed. Now, this is the cool part, because this is the original bill of sale for the car, right? And I don't think any of these people are still alive today. But this car was sold 2/16 in 1967. It is a real GTO 2-door hardtop. Options listed here. You can see them, they're listed right here. And they are the Cordovo top, which is the vinyl top, PB radio, which I think was the power antenna radio. I forget what the PB stands for. A console, automatic trans, power steering, power brakes. It had white wall tires and a full undercoat. And the full undercoat is important because the GTO, for all of its bodywork needs, was actually a pretty solid car. It's never been in an accident. Everything closes straight, and you'll see in future videos when I do a walkthrough of the car. It's a pretty solid automobile. But remember, I said I paid $3,000 for the car in 1997. Well, this gentleman paid $3,090 for the car in February of 1967. Right? Well, actually, with the 2% tax, it was $3,151. So, yeah, this was, I mean, $3,000 back then was a pretty substantial amount for a car. I think base Novas were like somewhere in 1900, something like that. I don't know if any cars were under $1,000. I know motorcycles were under $1,000 in those days, but I think it's kind of ironic that somebody bought it new for $3,000 and then I bought it for $3,000, and I've owned it this entire time, and I've had a lot of adventures with it too. I've driven it in blizzards. In fact, I drove it to Buffalo, New York in a blizzard to see a Bruce Springsteen concert in 1998. And I also used to, when I was in the volunteer fire department in Long Island, I used to go to fire calls in it sometimes, and I had wigwags set up in the front so the lights would pulse with my blue light. And that got old pretty quick. Got pulled over a bunch of times in that car. Had a lot of fun with it, right? And then life gets in the way. I moved out of state and I parked the car, and I would come back to drive it for a little bit. At the time, I had parked it in a garage at my parents' office, so it was out of the weather and it was under a cover, but it was still just sitting around. So when you're working on a project car, actually, yeah, here, let me show you some more pictures before I jump to that. Oh, here's an old registration. See, in New York, this is your title, right? This tiny little card. And this is actually, whoa, so this is 2 owners ago. So I think I have, yeah, so this is transferring to the guy I bought it from. And this guy doesn't match, so 1, 2, 3, I'm the 4th owner of the car. So, 60,000 miles. By the time I parked it up, it has 90,000 miles, which is about how many it has on the clock today. So I put a good 30,000 miles on the car, driving it around, just being, you know, a crazy kid. Yeah, here's a picture from West Hampton, and I think this was in 2004 or 5. You know, and there's another picture of it here, me and my buddies. And the car's in the foreground here, and we're all standing around in the back. And this is actually my favorite picture because this is the fastest the car ever went, but I lost the time slip for it. So this is actually me at the lights, and that's a WS6 Trans Am in the other lane. And I think I went 12.8? I can't remember now. I think I went 12.8 in the car on that pass, and was the only 12-second pass that the car ever made. And it was great. When I had the engine rebuilt, I rebuilt it to Ram Air 4 specs, or at least I had the engine builder build it to Ram Air 4 specs. So it's got the cam, and it's got the Ram Air exhaust manifolds. And instead of, you know, getting an aluminum intake from Edelbrock or Holley or whoever, we had everything, the original 670 heads, which are Ram Air 167 heads. We had them extrude home, which is when they put this like abrasive paste through it, so all the ports match up. So it was port matched, but it has a really smooth transfer. And I'm trying to think what else it runs a 69 GTO Judge carburetor on it. So I think those are the basic specs. We'll get into it when we're with the car, and I can you know, do a walkthrough of the video. But yeah, so when you're working on this stuff, you tend to accumulate quite a few books, right, and materials. And I kind of want to go over some of that stuff too, right? Because some of this stuff you can't get anymore, and some of it you can, right? In fact, some of it's quite useless. The first thing is, this is a original 67 shop manual, and this one I actually found at Half Price Books. This is my third copy of this because I bought 2 other copies of this, and somehow I lose them or I give them away. But this information you can't really get on the internet, right? This is how the dealers would service your car back in the day. And look at this thing. This thing is a phone book, right? And it has like really great information in here. Like if you need to rebuild your water pump, it tells you how to do it. You know, there's stuff in here that, like, you know, I mean, you can find some of this on the internet, and you can find YouTube videos of guys reading this and then demonstrating how this stuff works on the internet. But you can't really find, like, all of it in one place, right? So this is a pretty valuable thing. If you're going to own an old car, always get the old service manual, right? So that's the first. The second is, this is what they call a body service manual. Now, this is really hard to find, although I think they reproduce these now, and you can actually buy them through Ames or Performance Years, wherever the Pontiac distributor is. But this is like all of the stuff on like how to install the weather stripping and how to service all the body parts on the car. Like here's all the detailed diagrams on how to work through all this stuff. And it has all the part numbers in here too, so you can look stuff up, you know, and figure out how to service all the trim, and if you had power windows and various things like that. I mean, there's a whole chapter in here just dedicated to doors, you know. And yeah, look, there's you know, this is not limited, by the way, to Pontiacs. This is everything from 1967. There's Corvairs in here, there's GMA bodies, Chevrolets, like, you know, here's all the placements of the stripes that you could get. And this is for Pontiac. Here we go. Yeah, so this is all the different Pontiac Grand Prix, Bonneville. Here's all the wagons, like all the detailing stuff. So really useful stuff. A lot of this is not on the internet either. Like if you're restoring one of these cars, you kind of need this thing, right? This book, I got this one in the late 90s. There's a lot of tribal knowledge in this one here that you used to be able to get from people who knew how to tune Rochester carburetors, but since then, you know, a lot of those guys have kind of died off. There aren't a lot of people that know how to work on quadrajets anymore. So a lot of the information that used to be common knowledge is kind of captured in this book, and it's a pretty good book if you can find it. I happen to like it. you can find about half this information on the internet, a little more than half, but it's nice to have it all in one place if you feel like reading. This is another one that's very similar, you know. Most of the time people just send these carbs out to get rebuilt by somebody else. But this takes you through a lot of that old tribal knowledge, and I think this actually has color pictures in it, which was nicer than the other one, which looks like everything is Xeroxed. So it helps you walk through troubleshoot some of the problems with the Rochester Quadrajet, which is a great carburetor. Really, people always call them Quadrajunks, but I happen to really like them. They're a good economy carburetor when you're not getting on it, and they have huge secondaries, so when you do open them up, the car just screams forward. Getting into this is a lot of old knowledge, right? This used to be a lot more common information that you could find from talking to people, but as a lot of those old Pontiac guys die off and not a lot of young guys get into it, a lot of information is lost, and so you still can find a lot of the old 60s and 70s tricks in this book. So I happen to like this one. They still sell this one. I think this one I got in the mid-2000s. There isn't a lot of progress made on Pontiacs. In fact, most people nowadays, a lot of what was taught about the factory heads in this book, they put into those Edelbrock aluminum heads. So most guys, when they build a performance Pontiac, I know they just buy Edelbrock heads. And, you know, 90% of all the stuff that you would do mechanically, they did, you know, in the Edelbrock head. So you don't have to do the porting and you know, raising any of the valve seats or anything like that. It's all done already. This one, just a collection of articles from Hot Rod. Everything in here you can find on the internet now. This book is almost worthless. Like, it's cool to look at old articles and stuff, but I don't know. Any real knowledge that's in here you can find just by Googling on the internet, right? This book, so I'd say about 60% of what's in here you can find on the internet, right? Like the correct things for certain years, things like that. But I don't know that people really care about that kind of stuff anymore. I mean, the days of people really doing, like, you know, 100-point correct restoration seem to have passed. Everybody wants resto mods, right? But, you know, if you want to know what's the correct mirror to use on your car, because there are many out there, this is good for that information. You know, what's good for the correct shift knob. But I will say, what is nice is it does have part numbers too. So it does contain some of the information that's in the body manual, but it's only for GTOs, so you don't have to fish through everything else. And it does have a lot of nice exploded diagrams that the other one doesn't. So I'd say this is still worth picking up. What else? This book, so I have mixed feelings about this book. I got this as a gift from somebody, and I was really appreciative of it, right? I was really happy they gave me this book as a gift. But if you read through it, I mean, it's got some cool color pictures, but a lot of it's like basic bodywork stuff. It doesn't really tell you anything that's GTO specific. It's good walkthrough step-by-step stuff, but I think anything in here you can find in a YouTube video on how to. So, I mean, it's a good book. If you feel like having it, you know. That's the other thing too, is when you own a GTO, it's such an iconic car, you end up collecting a whole bunch of crap for it too. So, like, you know, I have all of these, like Hot Wheels, Johnny Lightning, all 1967 GTOs, you know. I just have them lying around because, you know, anytime I saw one, I was like, ooh, a 67 GTO. I got to pick that up, you know. I think that out of all of these, and by the way, this is like an eighth of what I have. I have a tub of them. You can see here. I have a tub of stuff like that. Most of it's GTO stuff, right? But of these, there's only one that's actually my color, and it's not even a vinyl roof car. So how about that? You know, you don't always get to pick the stuff you like, or, you know, that matches your car. But whatever. You know, I used to think the world of that stuff, and now I'm just like, hey, you can't drive it, so what's the point? Last thing I will show you, and I picked this up years ago. This is the original Motor Trend issue where they test drove the GTO. And there is an actual road test in here that you can read. There's all the 1967 options. This one's in really terrible shape. I think somebody gave this to me. It's, you know, it's interesting to read. It's definitely interesting to look at. I think there's a copy of this online if you just wanted to read the road test. I saw a PDF of it not that long ago. But yeah, it's in here. Road test of the GTO. So I have the original Motor Trend from 1967. Yeah, and a friend of mine sent this to me because he's like, "Oh, you have a GTO. You're gonna love this." So, so that's about it. In the coming week, I'm going to go to New York with a truck and trailer with the guys from Lucor, and we are going to get it running again because I think the last time it ran was 2016. It's been sitting under cover since then on 4 flats. And then we're going to drive it up on the trailer and shoot back to New York. Shoot back to Ohio with it and hopefully get it running. And, you know, I'll have guys at Lucor, you know, work on it some, and it'll get interesting. It'll be fun content. And then I'll work on it some, and who knows? We'll go do some adventurous stuff with the car. Maybe I'll do some autocrosses. We'll do some drag racing stuff. I've always wanted to do Hot Rod Power Tour. Some of you may remember me from Austin's videos at Lucor, where he and I last year did the Hot Rod Power Tour in his AMC Spirit AMX, right? This really rare 4-speed V8 2-door hatchback car that was kind of a nightmare. The best kind of nightmare, though. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, if you guys get a chance, I'll put a link in the description. You can go find those videos. And you can see us sweat to death in the middle of summer in a car with no heat, with no air conditioning, and giant holes in the floor. That rubs a tire at every chance it gets. So, great adventure. We broke down a bunch of times. Got a lot of great stories out of it. And I would love to do that with my GTO next year. So, we'll see. So yeah, so next video is going to come out soon, and we can talk about and I can do a walkthrough of the GTO, and you can see what it's like. All right, thank you.